But the mic can come.
Just speak.
So why can't everybody hear me? You promised me this would be okay. Thanks. Can everybody hear me now? Wonderful. All right, Church. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do, I've already done the welcome, so I'm going to do our land acknowledgement. The Willow Beach Field Naturalists Club and the town of Coburg respectively acknowledge that we are located in the traditional and treaty territory of the Michisago, Mississauga, and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Grandma, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. The Willow Beach Field Naturalists in the town of Coburg respectfully acknowledge that the Williams Treaty First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that today remain vigilant over their health and integrity for generations to come. We are all treaty people. Just one reminder, as you may know, when you came in the door, there's a paper on the glass doors about COVID. So masks are not required here, and I'm glad to see a lot of people wearing masks. They're not required in this facility, yet we're mindful that COVID is still with us. So please wear your mask if you so wish. Thank you. Okay, so a few Zoom protocols here. This meeting is being recorded. Can someone from the Zoom audience confirm that you hear us okay?
We can hear you, thank you,
Oh,
but we can't see you.
so that's a good thing, isn't it? I just hope you can see the presentation. For the in-person audience, please note that background noise can be picked up and may distort the Zoom audio. Okay. Constant improvement. For the Zoom audience, please mute when listening. You can unmute to ask questions, or you can use the chat, which Sarah will be monitoring, or simply use the raise your hand function. For the in-person audience, you may ask your questions, and the speaker will repeat the question for the Zoom audience. There's no need to leave your seat. Pub business. Bear with me, but I do have a few things I have to pass on before we get to the good part of the meeting. Digital to paper conversion for the curlew. Members currently receiving mailed paper versions of the curlew. Whether they can switch to digital, questions asked whether they would switch to digital or whether they want to continue getting paper versions. 38 people chose to switch to digital, which is a sizable reduction in paper. 12 people have not responded, and I take this opportunity to ask for your response. 17 opted to continue to receive the paper mailings. We do not have emails for 18 members, so they couldn't be contacted and they do not receive it digitally. Please be sure to update us if you change your email address or phone number. Thank you for that. Next item here, membership renewal. As you know, membership fees have remained fixed for a number of years. Please note, membership fees for 2023 are set at $30 for a single and $40 for a family membership. That's a $5 increase for each. This increase will only help offset rising prices for just about everything we purchase. We are introducing a free junior membership for those under 21. Please expect further communication regarding processes for renewals. Board elections. At the AGM at the end of February 2023, Willow Beach will have elections for the board. There will be 2 director positions open as 2 longstanding board members are moving on. And the first vice president position is open as well as Whitney Lake moves into the president's role. The full board consists of 6 directors and 6 executive members. You may contact me and Secretary Marina Scaza at willowbeachfn@gmail.com. That's a very important email address to use for more information. We have many new members who may be interested, nudge, nudge, in board positions, and we have openings on committees as well. So this is an opportunity to network with this community. We certainly have a lot of newer faces around, as I mentioned. So at this point, we've pretty much exhausted everything we need to say. Okay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jenny Jackman and Gerry McKenna, who will present tonight. No, it's not this time, is it? It's Elizabeth. Excuse me. It's bird sightings. And outings. Elizabeth. Look at myself. See, I'm not following my agenda. I'm reading my notes.
I've been told that I'm not to bounce around too much so that the people that are watching online can actually see me. Yeah. So sightings. The first sighting that I want to announce is something that I didn't see, but there have been a number of reports of evening grosbeaks in the area. Marina, you've had a bunch. Where's Marina? Yeah. Every day for the last 10 days. Karen Drew also contacted me this week. On Monday, she had 23 at her house. That's in the Northumberland Forest. There was a post on Facebook today. Elizabeth LaFontaine, who lives just north of Grafton, had some at her feeder. So stock up on sunflower seeds because you might go broke if they stay. Yeah. So, Richard, you told me you wanted to tell me about golden eagles.
Want was maybe the wrong word. Just before I tell you about golden eagles, when I was in Halliburton a couple of days ago, I ran into evening grosbeaks all over town, and that really surprised me. And I knew about the ones turning up here. A friend of mine had them on the hawk watches in High Park. So I just checked in Tyler Orr's winter finch forecast. He says expect an incursion of evening grosbeaks in the mid-fall in southern Ontario. So the finch forecast was dead right about that. Hope he's right about other things.
So I should have to say this, Richard, again, for the people that are watching at home, that Richard was in Halliburton and he had evening grosbeaks all over the place. So the finch forecast that was determined by Tyler Orr was actually accurate this year.
This year, yeah. And the other thing was the golden eagles. Everybody knows that between about October 24th to November the 10th, it's high golden eagle time. And you wait and you watch for northwest, possibly northeast winds. For 10 days, we had nothing but south and southwest winds. Finally, on Thursday, there was a northwest wind, and the next 10 days were to be south and east winds again. So everybody figured Thursday's the big day. Roger nearly took the day off work, but was very glad he hadn't in the end. Margaret and I went out and spent 5 hours freezing on our hawk watch and did not see a single golden eagle. In fact, hardly anything came over. We hardly had any raptors at all. And then I went home and was gratified to see that Holiday Beach and many of the other big hawk watches only had one golden eagle and none. But then I noticed today, on the same day we were out, the Grimsby Hawk Watch had suddenly shot up to 17th of the month. And I thought, that's odd, because it was only one bird on Wednesday, and they had 16 golden eagles go over them on Thursday. And Suzanne Wiggins, who was with us on our watch, after we left, she went somewhere else down near the lake, near Lakeport, and the golden eagle flew right over her, which she photographed. So everybody get out and watch for them, because apparently they're coming over, but don't go watch wherever Margaret. Another spot.
For the people at home, Richard has had a long report about the absence of golden eagles every time he and Margaret go to look for them. There have been a few coming over, and they're probably close to the lake, and it really depends on the wind. Roger took a week off work last week to see that he can have some raptor watching, and it rained almost every day and the winds were unsuitable. So you know, at all. So, but Richard and Margaret didn't find any. Although Suzanne, who had been with them on that day, that they were trying to find them, actually did. Suzanne Williams. Anybody else? What's going over? Yeah.
I had last 5 days in a row to the backyard feeder. I've had a red-bellied woodpecker.
Is that unusual in your yard?
It is mine, yeah. I thought it was a flicker first time I looked at it.
They're about the same size. A red-bellied woodpecker. Where's your yard, David?
Pardon me?
Where is your yard?
Oh, it's in Portal.
In Port Hope. Yeah. We have them fairly regularly at our feeder in the west end of Port Hope. I don't know where in Port Hope you are, so. But red-bellied woodpeckers are becoming much more common in the area. They're almost more common than hares these days. So. Russell, what do you got? Nothing? Simone?
Purple finch and bald eagles going through our yard.
Simone has bald eagles going through her yard. She's at Choke Road in Port Hope and not far from the Ganaraska River. So they're probably hanging out at the river to have them eat the dead salmon. Sometimes you see them there. There have been quite a few reports of bald eagles around the area this fall. So I guess they're recovering a little bit from DDT, but it takes a long time. And also at the marsh today, you had 4 green-winged teal. Yeah. So green-winged, there would be markers. So yeah.
Had a hummingbird today, which seems awfully late.
A hummingbird on the lakeshore west of Port Hope, or west of Coburn. You sure that it was a ruby-throated?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because this time of year it could be something else. The one really rare one I had reported to me several years ago was in November. Somebody had a hummingbird coming to their feeder still, and it turned out to be a rufous hummingbird, which shouldn't be here at all. They should be in Mexico in November. So watch it carefully too.
I didn't see it again.
Maybe passing through. Anything else? Yeah.
I had a murder of crows this morning on my walk chasing a hawk. And I didn't know what kind of a hawk it was. It wasn't huge. It was very light underneath. But the crows were vocal and right after it.
And you're Grafton?
RR5 Covert with Gully Road.
Gully Road, a murder of crows chasing a raptor of some sort. Any crows will chase any hawk or owl, and they'll make a terrible fuss. They'll also make a terrible fuss if they happen to see a raven, because they just don't like them. They just.
Yeah.
And I had several years ago, Graydon Bowman said that a red-tailed hawk at his farm at Welcome actually took a crow. It was probably a stupid young one that didn't know he should be afraid. but and then the crows left. Was one of them was taken.
I had 20 pine siskins suddenly descend on my bird bath. Oh wow! Just across the road from here. The first ones I've seen, and obviously they're following the evening ghosties.
Yeah, Margaret Bain had 20 pine siskins at her feeder, at her bird bath, which is just across the road from the library. Yeah. Anybody else have anything exciting to report?
Lots of chickadees feasting on my goldenrod in the backyard today.
Oh, Frank's let his goldenrod go to seed, so the chickadees have lots of food. We've had fairly regular visits from our Carolina wrens still in our yard in the west end of Port Hope. So, but keep your eyes up. If the winds are right, you may have a good raptor flight yet. So, and Trish, keep your eye out for that hummingbird. Oh, I was supposed to talk a little bit about outings. Richard, I just hope I have the right date. Richard Pope is doing a waterfowl outing on November the 13th. Is that the right date?
I hope so.
November the 13th. The meeting will be in the carpool lot at Division Street in the 401 at, what did I say? I wrote it down. At 8 o'clock.
AM.
Yes, for Hawks, for waterfowl, you want to be in the morning. You don't want to be out there with a flashlight on Presqu'île Bay. Yeah. And I should say that there are 3 Christmas bird counts in this area. They're sort of in Northumberland County. The Port Coburg one is on Saturday, December the 17th. The Presqu'île Brighton one is on the 18th, the following day, and the Rice Lake Plains count is on the 1st of January. So if anybody would like to be involved, Port Coburg and Port Coburg and Rice Lake Plains, Roger is the coordinator. Stick your hand up, Roger, if you want to talk to him about that. Doug McCray is organizing the Presqu'île Brighton one, as far as we know. But Doug doesn't answer emails very readily, so be persistent if you want to take part in that one.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I forgot to mention Julian Winter. Where are you? Julian Winter. Julian presented an idea to me. Julian, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I come out of a reading group, book club. Because I'm sure there's a lot of us that are reading books, and we're thinking, boy, I wish I could be sharing this topic with other people. And so I bounced the idea off Frank the other day. Maybe it would be, well, Frank said it might be a good part of the educational aspect of the Willow Beach Field Naturalists to have reading groups. So at the moment, I'm just throwing that idea out there and for people to think about. And Frank, I guess I should probably leave it in your hands to or you can talk about it. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but to see how that might unfold.
I don't want to see a step on anybody's toes either. But in this case, we make an exception. So anybody that's interested in probably, I guess you'd say a science type based, nature based.
Frank, you have to repeat the whole thing for the people at home.
Oh, I do.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so Julian Winter is a longtime member of Willow Beach Field Naturalists, a science background, and he's proposing that we think about, and I'm going to characterize it as a science-based book club. It could be nature, biology, whatever. And Willow Beach, I think, is a good thing we can support. Our objects of incorporation are centered around education, and I think that's right up. Education for seniors, you want to call it now, or younger people, or anybody. It's open to anybody, right? Julian. So anybody that's got any ideas about that, please let Julian know. I guess he threw it in my court. I'd be happy to take that up.
Oh, I can.
No, I'll do that, Julian.
You know, I'm reading it.
No, I'm being silly. Very good at that. Okay, so. Thank you, Julia. It's a wonderful idea.
So email me or?
Yeah, you and I have been in contact. Yeah, for sure. And anybody else that's interested, please send me a drop me note. Say it doesn't make any sense at all. We already have book clubs or whatever, or it's a good idea. It doesn't matter. See where it goes. Okay. Thanks, Julia. Okay. So now it's my great pleasure, and I mean that honestly, to introduce you to Jenny Jackman Gerry McKenna, who will present tonight. I know Jenny and Jerry for a couple of years now, and I can honestly say that I have a great deal of admiration for them and respect for them for what they brought to a citizen science project that's run by Willow Beach and Northumberland Land Trust. So Jenny Jackman has lived in Northumberland County since 2013, when she retired from her job as Director General of the Hand Materials Laboratory, Natural Resources Canada. Jenny loves nature and is on the board of WBFN. Gerry McKenna retired in 2020 from Ontario Power Generation after 35 years. Gerry is responsible for OPG's climate change and biodiversity program. With a lifelong passion for nature, Gerry's on the boards of the Willow Beach Field Naturalists and Pollinator Partnerships of Canada. Please welcome Jenny and Gerry.
A moment of suspense.
High tech.
Okay. Okay, so it is our very great pleasure to be able to talk to you today about a beautiful area in our county and an area that has had quite a history with Willow Beach Field Naturalists, as it turns out, because some 20 years ago or so, former president of this club, Carol Payne, and other people were very involved in looking at what was going on at Wesleyville. And we've been kind of keeping an eye on the place for quite a long time. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, Brian Maxwell and I and Frank went off to an Ontario Nature meeting on conservation of lands. And Mark Stab gave a talk about one of his pet subject areas, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And he mentioned Wesleyville, and Brian said, oh, I know Wesleyville. So we all ended up looking again at Wesleyville, and we met some folks from the GRCA who gave us some publications about Wesleyville, and we read in the publication that they gave us was actually an OPG thing. And in it, the very good biologist had done an extensive study, it turned out, for Gerry, and mentioned that one of the few things he didn't already do was a winter bird survey. So we thought, well, that's how we can get our toe in the door. So we wrote a letter to Gerry, who was then the manager of environment, and said, we noticed about the only thing you haven't done is a winter bird survey. Well, we've got a bunch of really good birders at Willow Beach, so would you like us to do a winter bird survey for you? And Gerry said, sure. So we've been all over the property ever since. And after Gerry retired, he joined our group, which is a very logical thing to do. So, so with that, let's move to the next slide. Okay, so where is Wesleyville? What you're looking at right now is a map of the county of Northumberland. And Wesleyville is, I hope you can see, yep, you can see my screen. Wesleyville is down here in the southwest corner. And it's showing as a pale mauve on the map here because it is, according to this official plan from the Northumberland County, it is designated as a rural settlement area, which is a bit of an issue, as you can imagine, that we'll come to a bit later. But you can see the magnitude of it. It's essentially what is a rural settlement area here is just about as big as the settlement area that constitutes actual, Port Hope municipality. And so it's fairly substantive. Now, just looking on this map also, you can see here the large Oak Ridges moraine, which is a principal feature in this county when we start to think about protected spaces. Now, here are the landowners. Gerry, do you want to say a bit about
I'll just touch a little bit on this. Because kind of this map gives a little bit of a good overview of, and ties into a little bit of the history of things we're going to be talking about in terms of the ecology and the studies. So we have really 4 main landowners in the Wesleyville landscape. We have Ontario Power Generation, which is, I always think of it kind of like a layers of a cake. The bottom layer of the cake is OPG, and in the middle, which is usually the cake part, is there we go. This Hydro 1. And has a slice in here, almost a wedge. And then at the top, Cameco. And then recently we kind of became aware of this other landowner, Remington, which is a developer that owns a lot of this area here. So it's kind of unique in a way in that because there's only a few landowners that exist here, it actually has some benefits for us in terms of access. We only have to deal with 3 or 4 owners to get permission, but also in looking at the future, advocacy for conservation measures is easier to deal with, just a few letters like this. But the one that, for those who may recall, this land slice here, Hydro 1 and OPG, a lot of you may recall, it used to be all Ontario Hydro prior to 2000. So when I was started getting involved with Wesleyville, I ran around 1997, 1998, when they said, would you go, we've had some work done, there's going to be a part, that suggests there's some conservation measures that should be done at our lands there. We had this whole big chunk to deal with. And so a lot of the programs that were generated at that time covered this whole slice, including all the work that we're going to be talking about in terms of grasslands and also brook trout, fishery studies, and reforestation. So all these areas we start planting trees. So that lays a little bit of the framework for everything that kind of came to follow.
Yeah, and down here in this corner, you can see on this map, the industrial area. Cursor's not behaving too well. Down here, you can see what was the industrial area that was back in the 70s going to be an oil-fired plant. And they got started quite a long way in the construction, and then the economics changed, and they changed the decision very abruptly and chose not to continue with that plant. And at this point in time, this land is surplus to OPG's needs for power generation. Okay, so back to nature. So to understand some of the ecology of Wesleyville, we'll kind of go big picture and talk about the eco district that Wesleyville is in. So it's in Eco District 6E13, which means it's part of the mixed wood plains of Southern Ontario. And you can see that it runs along the lakeshore there from Ajax over just about to Quinte to Trenton. And it's all fairly southerly, crawling along the lakeshore. And you can see where Coburg is, and Wesleyville is right in around here somewhere. Just right in around here, actually, just on the boundary with Clarington. Now 6E13, when you consider Ontario's and Canada's conservation targets, and these goals of having 25% of Canada's lands protected by 2025. And we're supposed to have 17% protected now. And you probably know Ontario is running at about 11% of its lands protected. Well, in this, and they usually are, I think, trying to look at that level of protection by eco district. So this eco district has a natural cover of about 4%, I think. And if I got it right, and I might have it wrong, but I did read somewhere that about 1% is protected in this eco district, officially protected according to the criteria. So that gives you an idea that, and now that's not true of Northumberland County, because Northumberland County extends all the way up to Rice Lake and beyond, and it includes Oak Ridges and Moraine. So the county itself has quite a lot of natural cover, maybe more like 30%, but not down here close to the lakeshore. So this is another view of the similar area. We're zooming in a little bit more. And I just want to point out to you that yellowy strip along the lakeshore there. This is from Nature Conservancy of Canada's Rice Lake Plains, Lake Iroquois Plain Conservation Plan. And the yellow part there is the Lake Iroquois Plain. And that is the boundaries of the old glacial Lake Iroquois that existed shortly after the Ice Age started melting, and then a great dam broke in the St. Lawrence River and all flooded out. And so the lakeshore shrank back to what we now know of as Lake Ontario. So the Lake Iroquois Plain surrounds the whole of what is now Lake Ontario. But within our eco district, it's this portion here. That has a very interesting ecology in that area. It's a top priority for conservation in studies that were done of Southern Ontario by Environment and Climate Change Canada and Nature Conservancy Canada. And it ranked as one of the highest areas for conservation in Southern Ontario by a large set of criteria. And one of them they were looking at were things like the biodiversity features, species at risk, migratory bird stopover habitat, waterbird nesting sites in coastal wetlands, and other criteria. So you can't say that it's ecologically not important. It's been an extremely popular area for development, and so a lot of it has been developed. But if you went back to pre-colonization, you would find the highest levels of biodiversity in Canada were existing in this mixed wood plains of Southern Ontario. And the North Shore of Lake Ontario would have been very important to ecology in those days. So, so now if we look a little bit closer again, and what we're showing here is areas that are recognized for their biodiversity. And through the MNRF mapping, we have shown here the ANSIs, the wetlands, and the woodlands along this strip along the North Shore. So the line in gray here is, oops, don't do that. All right. The computer is having a revolution. Okay, behave yourself, computer. Here's the 401. So, you know, as you get further north here, you're getting closer to the Oak Ridges Moraine and further to the kind of east end of the whole district, you start to see more woodlands. But south, right close to the lakeshore, you notice that there's something of a dearth. And there is Carr Swamp, which is a provincially significant wetlands. There is Willow Beach Marsh and the Port Britain wetland. Not swamp, behave. More in the middle. And then if you look at the area that's encircled by Wesleyville's boundaries, you can see quite an array of recognized features. The Wesleyville Ravines, which are a provincial ANSI, the Chrysler Point Swamp, which is a provincially significant wetland, Wesleyville Marsh and Chrysler Point Bluffs, which are regional ANSIs, and there are extensive woodlands in that area. And then if you also look closely at the map and sort of blur your eyes a bit, you can see that there is a pathways of connectivity up through here to the north, and also another pathway of connectivity up here through Newtonville Bog and so on up this way. So, you know, hydrologically, water drains through the lands this way and comes down south to the lakeshore in these areas. So it is, you're seeing the, you know, sort of the remnants of a somewhat disrupted but very active natural system. Okay, so what's protected in these lands? What we're showing here are the regulated areas. This is kind of a vastly simplifying an awful lot of stuff, but we're looking at two levels. We're looking at the County Natural Heritage System, which was approved a year ago, 2021, at the county level. And you can see the boundaries of the Natural Heritage System as they relate to Wesleyville, and they cover quite a large area because they recognize significant woodlands, which is a provincially significant feature, the ANSIs, the wetlands, the waterways, and the connectivity in the waterfront. All of these features are recognized, and they're covering quite a lot of the landscape there, as you can see. And that's significant because these features are protected under the provincial policy statement. So if you try to do development in this area, at least, you know, if they haven't changed the regulations on this already, if they hit any of these boundaries, they would have to do environmental assessments and so on. Then what's in orange there is what's the GRCA regulated areas. They're looking more at the floodplains and the waterways. It's a little harder to see, but you can see there's quite a web work of protected areas by the GRCA as well. Okay, so what are the principal features of natural heritage at Wesleyville? Is this one of your slides?
I think this is where I took it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to have a rest.
Okay.
I've been shoving you off the little screen here. So
Okay.
yeah, you can always, you can try and know where you are. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so the natural heritage system at Wesleyville, it's quite spectacular. I mean, it's got so many different features in this one landscape. About 500 hectares of woodlands and old growth forest. If you ever go by the 401 at Wesleyville Road and look south, you'd never know it's there. But it's just if you're down these ravines, you know, these tall hemlocks and these big tall oaks and that, it's just quite spectacular. 45, and then we also have a Barrier Beach wetlands on the south end of it along the lake shore, which are you know, quite provincial, as Jenny said, they're provincially significant wetlands. The Wesleyville Creek and Watershed, it's an important spring-fed cold water creek. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the following slides. But it is Wesleyville Creek is almost like the connecting tissue between the whole Wesleyville landscape. It runs from north to south, north of the 401 all the way down south to Lake Ontario. So it almost connects this whole landscape together. Chrysler Point Bluffs are they're kind of these high bluffs on the western portion of the Wesleyville landscape. Some grasslands areas in around the north part, around in between the ravine areas, with a lot of tall grass prairie indicators. Nature Conservancy of Canada has been very active and interested in Val d'Isle. It's been leading a few surveys looking at those areas. And also, we have about 100 hectares of regenerating woodlands. A lot of these are ones that were part of the initial reforestation efforts in the 90s and the 2000s. And we got about 700 hectares of interconnected natural areas in a large diversity of habitats. The wildlife, as I mentioned, there's a coastal barrier beach wetlands. They're critical breeding for migratory waterfowl and other birds. And we've been picking up least bittern recently, and I've seen it actually in some of the records in the past as well. Breeding birds are, have a high, a lot of waterfowl, a lot of woodland open country species. We've located breeding evidence for around 101 species of birds, including 10 species at risk. So a lot of with the breeding bird atlas, we've been putting a lot of that information into that ongoing initiative. Winter bird counts, Jenny mentioned how those kicked off in 2019. So we've been doing those for 3 years now, I guess. And most of the overwintering birds, but it's also a good overwintering area for owls. And we believe there's some good habitat there for bats. Something we haven't really looked at, but I think it's something that interests us in looking at as well. Good breeding habitat for all the species of frogs and toads, turtles, a lot of invertebrates, and plant species. And this is probably on the conservative side. So we think there's probably a lot more in terms of floral diversity in the landscape. And lots of mammals, river otter, beaver, there's some muskrat, white-tailed deer, all kinds of things that are leaves that area. So they, the creek and the marshes, they provide spawning and feeding for at least 8 species of fish. Some of the highlight ones we're going to talk about in a moment are brook trout, rainbow trout, northern pike, and white sucker in the marshes. And there's also been observations of, as I mentioned, lots of larger wildlife, deer, coyote, and other mammals. That one in there. Okay. Hit the eject button. So as the old growth and ravines, I think is Jenny. I think it's you.
It's all to me. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go through some of these features in a little bit more detail. The 2 ravines at Wesleyville are very significant features because of the considerable age of the forest stands, and they're among the oldest such stands in the site district. And if you've read the book, Ontario's Old Growth Forest, they comment that it is one of the best forests in the area. So that there are deep cut slopes that shelter extensive diverse eastern hemlock forest, and it provides habitat for a number of interesting species, including salamanders and blue beech, and rare ferns and rare sedge. Recent core samples that were done by Mike Henry, that's Mike Henry in the picture there. He's measuring at this point an old oak that I think came out at 180 years of age. The trees measured, aged in range from about 155 to 220 years. There's more than 10 hectares there that's strictly old growth. And few such of these stands remain along the north shore of Lake Ontario. So the ravines have a unique microclimate in that they are cooler in the summer and they are milder in the winter. So they're moderated from heavy winter storms. Old growth is more or less continuous in the East Ravine, and there are significant areas of mature forest and old growth in the West Ravine and in neighboring areas. And there's spotty old trees, quite interesting old trees all around the site. So just to say a little bit about what old growth is, and old growth forest, when people go in to assess it, it's in layers. And so there will be really, really super tall, super canopy trees. And then below that, there will be regenerating canopy trees, and then understory trees, and then, smaller shrubs and saplings that make up the undergrowth. And the undergrowth is very important to the overall forest ecology. So you'll have decaying wood and decaying old logs, the ground cover, organic litter, pits and mounds from falling over trees, cavity trees, and snags. So it provides just a tremendous diversity of habitat because there will be species who specialize in each of these different layers in an old growth forest. So old growth forests then are very special. We do have a little bit of video to show you later on about some of Wesleyville's old growth forests. So the wooded ravines and creek provide critical habitat for certain species. And if you'll see a photograph here of the upper end of the ravines where there are several beaver dams in sequence. And this is a relatively small creek, but because there are this number of beaver dams, what it does is create ponds and areas as it goes down. The creek comes down towards the lakeshore. And these beaver ponds produce quite a lot of additional significant habitat. And there's also a number that Jerry mentioned the plantations that were done by OPG, by most of them actually planted by Bill Newell and through his contracts. About 53 hectares of plantations that are also on site. Remember, what is it? It's about 2.7, the factor between hectares and acres. So that's quite a lot of land we're talking about. One of the problems we're having in this area is that it's totally unpoliced. It has been discovered by off-road vehicles, dirt bikes, and ATVs. In the past, it has always been a problem that has been mentioned in reports going back years. In the past couple of years, the problems have really got bad with COVID and with the closure of the Kamouraska Forest. Really, it's quite a severe and worrying issue with the ATVs. We're going to talk about that more later. But getting back to the fun stuff about Wesleyville, one of the things that's interesting about it is the cold water streams are spring fed. And there's numerous freshwater springs in the area. And this map shows you the results of a 2014 study by the GRCA when they went through and they mapped the positions of all these ravines and measured a number of their characteristics, including their temperature and chemistry. So they are quite genuine, they're quite interesting. Sometimes you can actually see them, the water burbling up from seemingly out of nowhere in the northern sections of these ravines. And that leads us into the waterways generally, and Jerry's going to talk to us.
Thanks, Jen. I just want to also add to Jenny's overview on this one. I love this map, and GRCA did, and it really frames everything well because the cold water streams really drive a lot of the ecology for the Wesleyville area, for brook trout, for another cold water species, but also even for the water quality of the area. There is some runoff, obviously, but a lot of these are cold water fed. The springs are cold water fed, and also we'll tie into when Jenny's talking more about the good, the bad, and the ugly of off-road vehicles and that. There can have impacts on where these springs are emerging. So I just like this map. It's kind of cool. So the Wesleyville Creek watershed, it's considered one of the highest quality cold water streams along the north shore of Lake Ontario. And it's critical habitat for a genetically pure population of lake trout and some other cold water species. For instance, American brook lamprey, not the sea lamprey, but the good one, American brook lamprey, is also found in this stream. In conservation of brook trout, it was the original focus of the aquatic assessments that were started around the year 2000. They arose out of a lot of studies that were done in the mid to early 90s that were funded by OPG or Ontario Hydro at that time. And they point in some of the main reports that was done, say, by Ecological Services, Rob Snetzinger, suggested that brook trout really are the focus in trying to drive some of the conservation initiatives and trying to conserve this population. So that's where it kind of started, and GRCA was the contractor, and to this day still are. And so we have over 20 years of really good science on the fisheries. So you're going to have to put your fish hats on and get rid of your bird hats for a little while. I think Cody's on the call, so he'll appreciate that. Cody Woodcock from GRCA, and maybe I don't know if that's even his picture. I'm not sure. But anyways, so it does connect the diverse habitats and ravine woodlands and the grasslands and wetlands all the way from the 401 down to Lake Ontario. So this slide kind of shows. I'm going to get a little bit into the monitoring, only because, not because it's going to be a test or a quiz later, but primarily just to sort of show the complexity of the studies and the evaluations that are going on to learn about this ecosystems that are operating here. So if you look at this slide here, shows some of the standard monitoring areas here that are used for a lot of the fishery studies in the Wesleyville Creek watershed. And that includes electrofishing, benthic sampling, done, and they're all done consistently at the stations. So you can get a history and a relevance and a comparison over the years. Nest surveys are for red surveys, as they're called, for rainbow trout and brook trout. Stream temperature monitoring, sort of look at how the cold water conditions are faring. And a stream is defined as cold water if it's less than 18 degrees on a daily average basis between the months of July to August. So, and then we also, GRCA is measuring stream flow and discharge. So we'll make sure that the flow is not really disappearing in the watershed. So they have a data logger for that. Here you can see some of the GRCA folks doing, probably looks like they're doing aging with scales. They do electrofishing, but they'll take scales from the fish and they can age the scales and they can kind of get a population structure of the brook trout population. So this is kind of like a little bit of a report card. So what this shows is that these monitoring stations across the top are the same ones as these ones here. And there's a few, there's a lot more data. We have several slides on this, but like showing here are the brook trout statistics. They're the relative abundance, they're the number, the density, and the biomass. So all this is part of the research that is done over the years. And there's also a couple of, I guess, what we call health assessments. So the index of biotic integrity, it is kind of an index of several factors that tells you how the stream health is in certain portions of the creek. And then you'll have a benthic index as well, which tells you the condition of the benthic organisms that are in the substrates. So with that, you can kind of get a general idea of the stream health. So if you look at these ones in green, as you can see, all are pretty excellent in terms of stream health, relatively unimpaired on benthic, and they tend to be the ones that are occurring more in the north part of the system. When you see some of the two red ones here that have poor stream health, poor benthos, and they tend to be the ones that are more exposed. We have over here in this area is kind of a degraded area that eventually feeds into the West Marsh. And this open area here, right along Lakeshore Road, you drive right over it when you go over the culvert. And that's what eventually disappears north into the farmer's field, east of Wesleyville Road. But you can kind of see it if you drive that way. You can just see a little bit of a ditch. So that's why those ones do reflect. What this enables us to do is to say, where do we focus our efforts on? What areas really need to have some attention done in terms of rehabilitation, whether it's revegetation, dealing with erosion, those types of things. And this graph on the bottom on here looks like I was talking about aging. This is the brook trout age structure. We like to have a nice, evenly kind of distributed age structure in any population. Not too many old, not too many young, sort of a good structure. Here you see, since 2013, when we started doing the scaling, you see that it's kind of trending recently towards more of age 2-year fish and very few age 3 or 4. And that's not really what you want. Now, there could be some other factors at play here. We've had it could be we've had different people doing the studies over the years, and everybody does it a little bit different. That could be a bit of a factor, but generally it does raise an alarm, and we want to make sure that they're recruiting to older age, mature individuals, so the population is healthy. Now, I'll talk a little bit about stream temperature. It's some of the abiotic factors that you want to monitor. How do you know it's still a cold water stream? So GRCA has deployed data loggers, stream temperature monitors here at these points. And you can see where since 2013, and here's the actual stations. It kind of highlights where station 1, which is down here, down the lower level edge, and stream 4, which is again down in the that area where I just pointed out where the branch goes up into the farmer's field, those tend to have the most red alarm ones where the cold water is going over the range that's acceptable. And that, again, that's a lot of it being open and exposed. So you also measure peak and average flows. They're kind of within acceptable levels if you're doing okay. And so it focuses efforts on where we want to go, if we want to do some restoration and rehabilitation of the creek. And finally, I think this is our last fish slide. But we also I mentioned about red surveys, nest surveys. We do them for rainbow trout. But we also do them for, my focus again here, we're showing brook trout. But you can see where this is like a 2021 spawn where they found possible reds or single red nesting locations. And you have to, I don't know if you know ever seen them, but it's like a little bowl in the gravel of the stream bed. And they lay their eggs in there, and that's where the young fry will emerge from. So that's what you have to have a good eye, a keen eye to be able to spot them. So, but generally, you can see if you look at brook trout over the years, a couple of real good years here, but overall, they tend to be kind of low, below the 10 reds per year in the system every year. Rainbow trout, again, very high earlier, but now it's starting to trend off. That could be something that's related to bigger issues, maybe they go to the lake and maybe there's something going on out there. So that could be what's going on with rainbow, but it gives us a little bit of a snapshot, and we can kind of now again, it's obviously they had keen eye, so some people have better seeing reds than others. So we always take note of that when we're looking at this data. Generally noted, there's a lack of high quality spawning habitat. So the stream itself may have a limited capacity for brook trout or rainbow trout. So we don't know what that is. That could be a limiting factor. But there's also the possible impact of off-road vehicles. A lot of these vehicles going through the creek, causing erosion and siltation of spawning beds, and undoubtedly that's having an impact on these sensitive areas. Okay, and I get to talk some more. So I'm going to move from the creek to where the creek ends, down at the Wesleyville marshes. So we're talking about Wesleyville Creek. The main branch comes down through the OPG property into what we call the East Wesleyville Marsh, and then we have the West Wesleyville Marsh, which arcs to the northwest. And these are the two coastal barrier beach marshes. The East Marsh is the final leg of the Wesleyville Creek into Lake Ontario. And barrier beach wetlands, they have a shifting outlet. Sometimes it's even closed, but there's always a connection, hydrological connection to the lake. Sometimes even when the barrier beach is closed, when the shifting beach has closed it off, you can still see seepage going through there. So there's always some kind of a connection going on with that. It's important for fish spawning, breeding birds and migratory waterfowl, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. They're small, but they're incredibly productive and diverse. And they've been the focus of annual marsh monitoring programs and climate change studies. Environment Canada, since 2010, has been using the West Marsh as one of 25 marshes across the Great Lakes to study the impact of climate change, changing water levels in the Great Lakes, and how that's going to impact some of these coastal marsh systems. And so they've been sharing their data with us, which is a bit of a bonus, and helps sort of get free data. So very good. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit about a little pet project here. As Jenny mentioned, I was recruiting from Ontario Power Generation, and as much fun as I did have working for OPG, there was always the stuff, I never had really time to really play with toys and that kind of thing. And so I always wanted to test out these acoustic monitors and trail cameras and all that to see how they could be used for wildlife monitoring. And here I had a perfect opportunity to do that. So in 2021, deployed a camera trap in East Marsh, and again in 2022. And I'd like to see how you can use these acoustic monitors as well, hand in hand with camera traps, and see how you can get data on wildlife species using a wetland. So it was a great little testing ground. The acoustic data provides depending how you program it, you can get to 4 hours a day of recordings. Get it in the morning, in the evening. You can program it to use so many minutes a day. It's all kinds of flexibility in the device. It's made by Wildlife Acoustics. They're based in the States, and it stores all your data information into WAV files. You run that through a special software. You can cluster all your data and try and analyze it. And you can actually search for species if you have a need to. So this map here shows the deployment of the trail cameras here, the T85 trail camera and an old Wildview camera that I had. And this is where we had this device here, which is the Song Meter Mini Wildlife Acoustic. There's a trail camera on the beaver dam. Results. Oh, by the way, we also had a camera this year in 2022 in the West Marsh, but haven't quite gone through all the reams of data yet. But that is where I picked up the spinner. So the results are, you can see here, this complements of OPG. They did a drone flyover. They have a drone team. It's actually stationed out at Wesleyville, which is pretty convenient. So they have these high-tech drone teams that would be the envy of in the Air Force. But they did a flyover, and you can see the East Marsh here, and you can see Chrysler Point in the distance. And Jenny's going to run a video on this later. Mm-hmm. And we got in 2022, the trail camera combined with the acoustic monitor picked up about 80 species of birds and 6 species of amphibians and 5 species of mammals. And the beauty of it is that while the acoustic monitor only hears things, it can't see things, the camera provides a little bit of extra, the eyes and the ears of the system. About 40 breeding birds, about 4 or 5 that are confirmed breeders, and species at risk, as I mentioned, and 90 species of plants. So this work here was done by voluntarily, so it's a joint working group initiative. It's not OPG funded work. The GRCA work that I talked about earlier is funded by GRC, by OPG and Hydro One. And just a little snapshot, here's an example. It's blue-gray gnatcatcher is kind of a secretive little guy. You may not pick them up in your breeding bird surveys, but the acoustic monitor that was out in the wooded swamp area picked it up consistently over and over and over again. And that's the acoustic signature right here. So once you have these acoustic signatures and know what they are, future studies, you can run them. It'll find it for you because it knows now what it looks like. So it's kind of a very powerful system to work with. And I get to rest.
Okay, so now back to the pretty pictures and stuff. So we just thought we'd show you a few more shots of some of the other noted areas in the Wesleyville site. So Chrysler Point Bluffs is the regionally significant Nancy. So here's some photographs showing you those 8 to 15 meter steep clay bluffs. And associated with them is a smaller ravine, upland scrub, and successional fields. They do provide habitat for bank and rough-winged swallows. It's a very rare ecosystem along the coast, becoming more rare with slope stabilization works. The forested riparian valleys provide cover for migrating birds. There's also some interesting plants there. There's a large population of fringed gentian, and this was observed in 2003 by Dan Gregory, who did the original natural area surveys under contract to Jerry, actually. And we've now reconfirmed that they are still there when we did some work with students from Fleming College just recently. And we've also seen fringed gentian in 2 other spots on the Wesleyville site, including right behind the old powerhouse. So they like to live on the sort of a limestone base. And so they're finding that there. And there's some other interesting rare species there as well, including the grass of Parnassus and showy later slippers. The grassland areas are interesting. They're not really recognized by the natural heritage system. They just look like vacant lands, and this map kind of shows where they are. There's a northern section of grasslands up here. This is the log boundary between Cameco and Hydro One. And this northern area, about 33 hectares, is owned then by Chemical. And it was originally used for agricultural purposes for primarily grazing cattle. But they did attempt to plant pasture and so on. It didn't work terribly well, as you'll see when you see what the soils are like. And then there's another area of grasslands here, which is owned by Hydro One. And the power lines come through here, and then they swing north and go up through this way. So these areas are kept clear in part because of those power lines. This gives you some idea of photographs of what they look like. So they were taken, they're very dry, sandy soils. They were taken out of agricultural production almost 50 years ago. And they have not filled in hugely. I mean, they will slowly fill in. There, you know, Valdezil and the people from NCC were very interested to know whether this had characteristics of a natural prairie or natural grasslands, not just cultural meadows. And we did find they're extremely good eye for spotting tallgrass prairie indicator plants. And over the surveys that have been done there, including surveys by Dale Leadbeater back in 2002, we looked through the old data. There's about 20 tallgrass indicator species that have been found there, which is pretty significant because when areas are stripped for agriculture, even if they have the soils that would naturally support a tallgrass prairie, they tend not to regenerate to tallgrass prairie if you just stop using them, because those species don't necessarily come back. You tend to get crowded in with invasive species. So the areas are, because they're so sandy and they're very accessible from the en route, there's a lot of dirt bikes and ATVs that get down in these areas, and they like roaring around and doing spins and loops in the sandy areas. That's causing a lot of erosion. But is it still functioning as a grassland? So we are locating there grassland species, birds like the meadowlark, the bobolink. We haven't seen a lot of bobolink, but we have seen a couple. Field sparrows, clay-colored sparrows, grasshopper sparrows, and other species that are living in the grasslands. So that doesn't seem like a very large area, but it is significant given the very low, this is an extremely rare ecosystem in Ontario. And the fact that this one is still surviving without anybody looking after it at all is kind of interesting. Yeah, there's a question back there.
Yeah, Jenny, have they ever done a burn?
Oh, no, nobody's doing any kind of stewardship on these lands at all.
But it would be an interesting proposition.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it could potentially be, it could certainly be a candidate for rehabilitation to a more comprehensively natural tallgrass prairie with the burning and species management and so on. It'd be a fair amount of work to get rid of all the invasives that are there, but it certainly has the natural soils for it. And probably at times over the thousands of years, prairie will come and go with climate and forest fires. So if the natural occurrence of forest fires is every sort of 50 to 100 years, then it will tend to strip areas like this, will take a long time to recover. And in that recovery, this long succession to other ecologies will exist as tallgrass prairies, and there are species who will find those areas and thrive in them for decades at a time until they slowly fill in. So you can see in the northern picture there, it's actually quite good quality grassland if you look at the species that are there. But you can see the white pines encroaching gradually from the back, and the pines tend to come in on grassland areas as one of the first trees coming in on succession. And but there are species that like those short pine trees and that thrive in them, like the Kirtland warbler and others. So they tend to wax and wane. Yeah, so this is a feature that does add significant biodiversity to the site overall. Here's just some pictures of some of these prairie indicator species that have been taken there. And we'll talk more about where you can find some of these pictures about the property later on. So the real ecological value of Wesleyville is not only these individual parts, it's actually that they're all part of an interconnected system. Was this something that you wanted to talk about? Oh, no, it's okay. So it has an extraordinary diversity of habitats for one site of this size, and where it's located too, just off the greater Toronto area, just north of Lake Ontario. It's not so much the magnitude of any one of these areas, it's the fact that they all still exist and they all still function as a system. almost by accident. And when Dan Gregory did his work in 2003, he found 38 different ecological land classifications on the site. It is also, as I mentioned, within this glacial Lake Iroquois Plain. I'm just reminding you, an ecoregion that was identified by Environment and Climate Change Canada and NCC as being one of the highest priorities for protection in Southern Ontario. It's one of the largest remaining natural areas along the North Shore of Lake Ontario and the largest near the GTA. And you see here another picture of one of those beaver dam areas at the north end of the East Ravine that's creating those interesting habitats of wet wooded lands. Okay, so this is the sad part. What we're showing you here is some of the damage that's done by trespassing off-road vehicles. It's a completely unpoliced area, except for the southern part, and OPG had some security, but it's difficult for these companies to maintain securities on these lands that are kind of vacant and they are not, you know, working on or close to these lands for the most part. And there's a lot of sensitive areas in Wesleyville. And these areas sometimes are also very attractive to off-road vehicle sports people because they are the slopes, they are the wetlands, you know, that's what they're attracted to. It's also, unfortunately, ecologies that are habitats that are extremely sensitive to erosion. So it's a pretty bad problem. And this map might break your heart if you were looking at all of Jerry's maps and seeing where the springs were in the spawning areas and so on. What this map is showing is damage by off-road vehicles. So the white lines are all maps that have actually been posted on the internet publicly by ATV users, even though these are all private lands and marked no trespassing. The little dots and so on are all stream crossings. The purple ones were ones that were measured and noted by the GRCA. The light blue ones are ones that we mapped. And then you can see the H's are where there are hunter stands. The little triangles are where there's severe erosion. And the stars are the various entry points around the site. So it's quite discouraging. We do have some hope though, because the municipality is working with us to try to get the landowners together to try to develop a bit of a strategy to manage trespassing and allow these areas to recover. So we are working on that. We do have some support from the municipality, so keep your fingers crossed for us. So why is it and when is it a problem? Well, I tend to think of off-road vehicle damage or damage by any kind of human disturbance as kind of like a pair of hierarchies. So one hierarchy is the ecology and how sensitive it is to damage. And the other hierarchy is the users, in other words, what we are doing on the land. So the least damaging thing we could do is observe it with an aerial photograph. And then people get down in the ground on their boots, and then it goes up to people riding bicycles, people riding horses, which I like to do, people on small motorized vehicles, people with larger motorized vehicles, and on it goes. And so the damage gets worse as you get heavier, bigger vehicles that are going faster. And the damage is also worse depending on the ecological sensitivity. So this slide is really showing you something of the hierarchy of ecological vulnerabilities. And if it's sloping, on slopes, that will accelerate erosion, and it tends to force water flow into particular areas, and that cuts channels. It also deprives neighboring areas of water, so they become dry, and then you get high erosion and dry right beside it. You also disturb the vegetation exposed to roots and so on. And eventually in an area like this one, you can get the trees starting to collapse in. Vulnerable soils like sandy soils, stuff that doesn't have bedrock in it, where the roots have gone, such as in the sandy areas and in the grassland areas. Forested areas because you open the canopy. And when you're rejuvenating a forest, you need some open canopy areas. But if you get too many open canopy areas, particularly if you're not getting seedling regeneration because the undergrowth is badly disturbed and the soils are compacted, then you get sunlight hitting those cold water streams that warms up the streams, that removes their usefulness for fish spawning. So these factors all tend to come together. In the stream beds, they disrupt the spawning areas. They literally rip them up. They physically disrupt them. Other habitat, they disrupt the flow. They literally kill small animals like amphibians and turtles and so on. And at the waterfront, it's a fairly narrow waterfront, but it will take it out as a potential breeding area candidate because of too much disturbance and noise. So it's unfortunate. It's I know people love to go into these areas. They're beautiful areas, and I can understand why they like to go through them. My guess is that people don't really understand how much damage they're doing. And you know, the old growth forest at Wesleyville is slowly being destroyed. I don't like to say that because it sounds alarmist, but that's what we're seeing now. And it's really very worrying because, as we mentioned at the beginning of this talk, there's not much old growth forest south of the 401 close to the lake at all. So anyway, enough of all that depressing stuff. Let's get back to the more fun bits. Who's the joint working group? Is this my slide? Is this your slide? It's my slide. Okay, we do some more slides. Yeah, okay. So the joint working group was formed in 2019, although as I mentioned, Willow Beach has been involved in this area for quite a long time. And we did our first thing. This is our first activity, the winter birding team of 2019. And so that's some of the crowd that have been involved with us to do the birding work there. We formed the Wesleyville working group so that we could raise awareness about the natural features there and encourage and support better stewardship. So we work with the landowners who've been very good about letting us come on the land. And we always provide them with reports and tell them what we're doing. And the Nature Conservancy of Canada and the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority have been mentors to us, have been very, very helpful. They've been involved in our work. And they've added a lot of competency to what we've been doing, along with other naturalist organizations. And here's some of the things we've done. So we've tried to continue some of the natural area survey work. We don't have the depth of competency that Dan Gregory did in 2003, but we have been doing breeding bird and winter bird counts since 2019, 2 bird surveys a year. We've done surveys of the woodland areas and the old growth forest. Surveys of the grassland area, the wetland areas, a lot of work done there. We're starting to do more education and outreach this fall. For the first time, we're doing projects collaboratively with Fleming College. We're doing 2. They're working on updating the 2003 ecological land classification work that was done by Dan Gregory in a very interesting project with GRCA. And I won't get into the details of it because of time, but GRCA had to digitize the old maps. And then the students could carry these maps around as a field map application live, and they could draw new lines where boundaries had moved live right at the time. So it was very interesting to see how that worked. On November the 11th, Fleming College forest technician students are coming along with Ben Walters to do an old growth forest assessment, which is quite interesting. There are different ways of assessing old growth forest, but they basically will draw transects across the ravines. It's good it's the young students doing this, not me, because I have to go down the ravines and up the other side. And they will look at a number of different parameters of the old growth. And so I think they're going to do about 5 transects on each ravine. So that's going to be very interesting to get the kind of technical data. We've written 16 reports. I think it could be growing because we do reports every time we go on. And they're quite colorful with photos and things and descriptions of who was there and what we did. They're all on our Willow Beach website. And we have also posted a lot of photographs on the site, on our SmugMug site. And all of this is maintained for us by Dawn McLeod. So a big shout out, thanks to Dawn for helping us put that together. And the reports have had a tremendous impact because they put down a record of what we're seeing. And we did not really realize, well, these are really citizen science reports, right? They're not really very technical, but they have been a very interesting record of what's going on there, and the landowners have very much appreciated it, getting these records and the maps of where we've been and the photographs of the birds and counts of the species and measurements of the old growth trees and so on. It's not huge by professional standards, but it has been data coming out that they appreciate. We've also done some advocacy work with the province, with the Ministry of their Environment, Conservation and Parks, with our local MPP, with the municipalities, with the Northumberland County Planner. Dwayne Campbell's also been quite helpful to us. And so we were engaged in the process of the natural heritage system as well. and with the landowners and municipality on planning and trespassing issues. So we've been trying to do what we can do as amateurs and as a citizens club. And it's been a lot of work, but there's a lot of stuff there now. I'm not saying at the end of the day, our hearts won't all be broken, that they won't go in and develop stuff at Wesleyville. And anyway, you know, it may happen. Okay, now there's, one more slide then. This is, we do have an iNaturalist project, which is another thing Don McLeod helped us put together. And Jerry is also involved in establishing this iNaturalist project. So you can, if you've got an iNaturalist account, you can go look up the Wesleyville Biological Inventory. It was started in June of this year. And as you can see, we've now got 270 species identified at Wesleyville and about nearly 500 observations. So every time we send a team on there, we ask them to take pictures and identify what they see, and it also automatically maps it. So this becomes another resource of data for the ecological land classification work and conservation.
I'll just point out that the blue heron picture and the green heron picture, there's a trail camera that was on the log there.
Yeah.
So it takes better pictures than I do.
So you like standing on the log and posing for the camera, apparently. And this really great picture here of the monarch caterpillar was taken by Chelsea Marcantonio of the Nature Conservancy, who does a wonderful job photographing insects and stuff. Okay, so this is kind of a busy slide, but I think we'll just bounce over it.
I think we'll just leave, just comment on this because we want to say not lose anybody. Make sure you stick around for the movie. The movies
are coming up. Yeah.
So this is just kind of a bit of a shout out to, you know, Jenny mentioned about the landowners. The landowners have been very active on these lands even before the working group. So OPG's been, and previously Ontario Hydro had a lot of programs that started off in the late 90s and continue on to this day, involving groups like NCC and GRCA. So it's been a lot of good work has been laid down beforehand with some of the surveys that were done. Even Cameco even sponsored a wildlife survey of the ravines in around 2003 as well. So there's a lot of historical archival information that we were able to draw upon too. So a lot of this work that it's been done is, this year OPG is looking to get recertified as a gold certification by the Wildlife Habitat Council. And a lot of the information they will be using draws on some of the work that the working group has contributed in terms of biological information. So it's kind of really good partnership that way.
Okay. And this gives you an idea about how many people have helped us. We've been very grateful for the assistance that we've got from within the community. So thanks to the landowners, first off, for allowing us on the property and tolerating us. And the municipality of Port Hope, Mayor Sanderson was the mayor until the last municipal election. Councillor Vicky Make, and then the former director of community development, Tom Dodds, he came and walked the ravines with us himself and took a number of photographs. So the municipality of Port Hope we've worked with and we're still working with. Nature Conservancy, Barb Heidenreich, who I know is on the line. Thanks, Barb, who's helped us, and folks from Fleming College. Then there's our renowned birding team. The Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority people, we've been really good. As I mentioned, county planner, Wesleyville's renowned watershed team. Folks from the Old Growth Forest Group, Mike Henry, who came in and walked the area and did some core samples for us, and other members from the Ontario Old Growth Facebook site folks actually came. And Mike Duhamel, who I'm mentioning here, did provide us with some video that we hope we can show in a minute. And then other members of our working group, Robert Fishlock and Miriam Mouton from the Northumberland Land Trust, Doug McCrae, especially when Lone Pine Land Trust was separate, was a member of this group and is still doing birding for us, Brian Maxwell, Carol Payne and Rick Beaver, who 20 years ago went and walked these ravines and wrote an extremely evocative and also very technically correct letter about the ecology of the ravines. That was quite an eye-opener for me. Okay, so now we are going to attempt moving it. Okay, here we go with the popcorn out. We'll see how we can do this. Everybody hold your breath because there's no guarantees. But I think the first one is got one up here. Actually. We try resharing the screen. I'm going to try resharing and picking up a different thing. Okay, here we go. So this is given to us by, or loaned to us by Media Gone Mad, by Mike Duhamel, who came and walked the East Ravine, did a forest hike. And he did this with his iPhone.
No music, but yeah.
It does have, the original has music, but we're not seeing it because it's muted for the Zoom. You can see some of the super canopy trees up there. I don't know how this is coming off for the folks on Zoom. It may be, it's a bit choppy, I see here. See some of that interesting undergrowth there. This was in a sort of late September when the video was taken. And he's coming up through the ravine into the kind of tableland areas at the top, which are not so much old growth, but still a very beautiful and mature forest as well. Okay, so that's movie number 1, and I will have to stop sharing. And now we shall see whether we can bring up any more movies or not. There we go. Okay, so Jerry, you want the coastal wetlands next or the e-fishing?
Let's do the e-fishing
E-fishing.
next.
Electrofishing. Electrofishing.
Catherine Pyman did this one.
So what I'll do is open it.
She kind of tagged along with the GRCA on their work.
And then we'll have to reshare. So here, share the screen. Yeah, just go on there. Should be shown. Okay, sorry guys. I'm not sure why I did that.
There you go.
Should be up, right? It's here. Close this one.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to be fishing. See it.
There you go.
Yeah, it's there, but they're not
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
it, right? So I have to share my screen. This is what's not happening. Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm gonna try sharing the screen again. This must be it here because we closed the line.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So this is video by Catherine Payman, and there they are electrofishing.
So with electrofishing, they can get different types of species that are present at these stations and get a sense of the population structure and relative abundance of the species in the population. So it gives a mild shock, but the fish, it's not lethal. They return them back to the creek. They also do take scales and do aging of some species as well. Sponsored by Canadian Tire.
Yeah, free shout out to Canadian Tire.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted.
It's still, yeah. There you go, there's the team. Jerry, can I ID all these fish, right?
I could just make something up. Brooke Stickleback. If Cody's out there, you can chime in and tell me if I'm wrong.
So we will stop sharing. We'll close close that. So we don't.
Yeah, the last one while Jenny's setting up is the OPG drone team did a flyover of the shoreline areas in the marshes. And they, this is just one of the videos they produced that shows that.
Okay, here we go. Share. Great.
You can see the drone team if you look closely down by the other side of that big inlet. They're down below.
We're just passing over the gentian violets now. Some of them.
So this would have been the original forebay that would have provided the water for the generating station. That's what we're flying over. And they have these big bat-winged drones. They're quite impressive. They even have drones that are equipped with heat sensors. These guys were the guys who used were loaned out to the Ministry of Natural Resources and found the wild pigs in Pickering using their heat sensors on their drones. They found them within 5 minutes. They were flying over the East Marsh. You can see the Berry Beach wetland, the outlet, and it's gonna finish up over. The East Marsh is a lot different than the West Marsh. You see, it's a lot less open water. The West Marsh, you can see the outlet there in the picture, and and you can see Chrysler Point at the far end, and it's going to finish up on the West Marsh.
So this is the provincially significant area that's been classified provincially significant. You can see how narrow that beachfront is though. Okay, so that I will just stop sharing. Okay, so that's the story on Wesleyville. Some hands are up and so on. So yeah, questions. Yes, we have one from the floor. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Carol Payne, and I wondered if I could come and just speak for just a second, because this was a project that's a passion project of mine.
Yeah, welcome, Carol. Thank you.
I have a little more paper for you, but I need to talk to you about Tabuti. Yeah, so this was not planned, but I'm really happy to be here, and yeah, and thanks to Catherine who drove me. I was president of Willow Beach between 2002 and 2004, when we made maybe the second or third attempt to see whether we could do something to preserve the land. And it had been a passion project with me for a long time, because one of the reasons I came to Port Hope was one day, a long time before that, I heard this very intelligent sounding woman from Port Hope who was talking about the city of Toronto wanting to fill in these ravines to put the garbage of Toronto in them. And the Sculthorpes were really instrumental in dealing with the province and with the railway and with a bunch of other people, and protected them for a while. And the reason that I really want to talk is, I mean, thank you, Jenny, and thank you for yourself, because I knew these guys. Well, I didn't know Jenny because she wasn't here, but I did know you. And yep. we worked together. Well, you did all the work, but I knew about it, and I was one of the 4 people, I think, that trotted across the ravine, and Rick Beaver was one of those people at the time, and Bill Newell, and I think Jim Fott, who was president of the Ontario Naturalist Club in the first place. That was a whole other story, but we all went one day when I was still able, just barely, with a lot of help from the guys, to get me from one place to another. So I became very, very passionate about it. I became very passionate at the time also because during my presidency, we were faced with the possibility of having Tucker Creek put a golf course in at the west end of thing. And when you say that there's I mean, they were talking about over those fields, right? And they were talking about a golf course that was going to take, you know, thousands of liters of water every day to look after the golf course. And the little subdivision that's down there past Wesleyville has water troubles all the time now anyway. So the municipality was helpful at that point. And then the other major thing that we were involved in was stopping the gun range that was going to come across, use the hydro property that's on the lake. And that's what they said they would do, but they were also talking about bringing one of those military things that was, they were going to train people to protect the plants, the nuclear plants in Pickering and other places. And at the time we were involved in war in Afghanistan, so there wasn't any training area or there wasn't enough training area, and they were going to come in, and if you thought that the ATVs are going to distract, and we would be having a whole lot of different discussion now.
These were guns that could fire over a distance over a kilometer or something.
Well, they could hit somebody on the 401. And when Linda Thompson heard that, then there was more of a discussion with OPG. But yeah, it was the police force in Nottingham.
And that came across my desk while I was working there, and I said, "This is, you gotta be kidding me."
Yeah, and then they decided that they would change the firing range, and they would make it go across the lake. So we got anyway, it was an interesting discussion, but we won both of those. And then there is the issue of the garbage incinerator, which was past my time, and people just put that away nicely. But the issue is really quite, it's really quite serious. That's three major sort of pushes to do something, four major pushes to do something to destroy those ravines. And I think it's absolutely marvelous that you guys have come and done so much work and involved so many more of the community. I have all the documents because I've been looking at them and trying to sort them out, and I will get them to you because I think it's important for you to know what the history was in our involvement with Cameco. And Willow Beach was just, I mean, I knew nothing about any of this stuff. So, but they all knew that, and they knew I was passionate. And I just have such gratitude towards the executive when I was president, because people knew that I knew nothing and they were willing to help and make sure that we got it right. And we got it as right as we could, but we couldn't go too much further. And so all of that is there. And just to say that when you think about what you heard tonight, which is marvelously documented, I mean, by people who know what they were doing, I just wanted to bring a little extra passion that says, decisions are being made all the time about whether we protect those areas or not, and the area is put to be industrial. Well, industrial means industrial, and it's not just industrial on the island, right? It's industrial up through the areas of the flatlands and the plateau, and to say an ANSI, which is a protected area of scientific interest, doesn't mean anything because in the end, it doesn't mean anything. It can be overridden. And the government that we have now almost overrode, or has overruled the agreement that you made about the possibilities of doing something with Wesleyville and protecting it, at least at a certain point. And even those, from what I understand, even those were compromising, or the possibility of compromising the lands. And so I have some stuff that you don't have because I haven't given it to you, that I've been going through, and it's really pretty interesting. But it's something that I think we have to, as a club, really think, okay, now's the time to actually do something about it. We tried a couple of times and we really have to work on it. But I just can't thank you guys enough for all the work. Anyway, thanks.
Okay, so if you have questions and you're on the Zoom, you can write them in the chat, and Sarah will read them. Keep an eye on the chat and read any questions to us. There were some hands up at one point in time. I can now see everybody. Are there, sorry?
Oh, the hands up here.
Have we got hands up in the room? Does anyone have any more questions from within the room? No? Okay. And are you getting any comments or questions from the?
We have a comment from Barbara. She said, super, the videos worked well, thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay. And it looks like John Gale is waving his, can John be unmuted? He's got his
I
hand
saw
up.
Don's hand up earlier.
I don't think his hand is up, I think he was just doing
Oh.
that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this is a hand that I'm.
What's your hand?
Oh,
Okay.
it's my hand.
Okay. Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your attention.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that. Very comprehensive. Without these two individuals, we wouldn't have this presentation tonight. So I think there's a really big round for us. Thank you, Carol, for coming up and giving us a little more history of the studies of this land. I have two canes for you folks. So this it's kind of method in my madness. So you'll be able to continue working on the lands. I won't do anything with that now. I'll give it to you later. So closing, the next general meeting of the Willow Beach Field Naturalists Club happens on Friday, November 25th with Mark Stapp, Program Director for the Central Ontario East Region of the Nature Conservancy of Canada. Mark will present the NCC Landscape Scale Conservation Plan and projects for the Rice Lake Plains and Lake Iroquois Plain areas. And we're talking about that in your talk tonight, that area. So Mark is actually an expert on the Rice Lake Plains, and he'll tell you everything you ever wanted to know about the Rice Lake Plains and more. I guarantee it. So that's all I've got to say. Anybody have any questions for the questions we close up tonight? Good, good, no questions. Okay, good night, everybody, and thank you for coming and joining us again. Thank you very much.